So first of all, for any of you who are disappointed, because I'm not Sri Ramaswamy, if you watched your agenda for the week, Sri and I were supposed to share the stage where he would talk about policy and I would talk about the industry side. And we had this really delightful banter planned. And then he had a family issue come up and couldn't come, so I now have his notes. We had a great conversation Monday. So you'll be seeing me play the role of Cynthia and the play of Sri. But not really. I told him I would attribute anything that was appropriate. I think it's just really, we're at an inflection time in US history. It's kind of fascinating. It did come about, certainly accelerated because of things like COVID, but we now are at this inflection time where some of the words that we've been using are, quite frankly, I'm tired of some of them. I think we're all tired of the word resilient. I know I'm personally tired of collaboration as a word, but not as a concept. So I think, I'll talk a little bit about how we have to do innovative collaboration, and it's really important that we do that. It's just that we need to make sure it ends with action and not just meetings, because we do a lot of talk and a lot of meetings, a lot of presentations. I intentionally don't have a PowerPoint because it's like another collaborative tool that I don't really enjoy working that way. So one of the things we need is perspectives. We need to always balance perspectives from policymakers, from industry, and from academia, because those bodies are how we're going to swim successfully into the next, next generation, next future. So government does play a crucial role in enabling digital transformation in manufacturing, and really the government's role is to listen to industry, but they don't always hear from all of you. Is it mostly industry here? I think we're industry. The government doesn't hear from industry. So things like the World Economic Forum, or like in my case, the US Center, which is, just to clarify what this entity is, it's a partnership between the state of Michigan and the World Economic Forum. And we're trying to represent what happens at the global stage at the forum is very fabulous and interesting, because you find out what everybody's doing around the world. It makes you step back and say, are we doing enough? Do we do differently? How do we learn from each other? So without that framework, that's only for very few very large companies. So for the small to mid-sized companies who are part of our end-to-end supply chain, we have to jump in and make sure we're communicating with them and hearing their voices and carrying their voice to Washington or to our local capitals, our state capitals, to make sure that the legislative issues we need are pushed forward. These gentlemen have some notes for me that aren't moving, so I'm just going to stand here for a second and talk a little bit about the small business community. Thank you. So we were talking a little bit, when Sri and I talked the other day, we talked specifically about the policies from government that work. What's working from government? What can we learn from? A great example of a true public-private partnership, probably the best one I've seen in a long time, is the CHIPS Act. There are details, people know more about it than I do about the exact numbers, but something like $50 billion of seed money from CHIPS Act has generated $300 billion in investment. That's how public-private policy has to work. And without that working that way, we can't expect the government to do everything for us. But right now, the government is working closely with AI to monitor AI for safety. They're working closely with cybersecurity, a risk that I think is huge for the US right now. Just as we're beginning to rebuild things, we're building them with digital, in digital factories, with digital tools overlaying into any existing manufacturing, replacing. At the same time, we're exposing ourselves every single day through cyber, and once again, that move simply becomes more extreme with the smaller companies. The smaller companies don't know how to do that. When we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, it's all about digitizing, but what is missing in this story historically has been the productivity in manufacturing. So if you talk to, I don't know how many are small business people, if you talk to people with 100 employees or fewer, 500 or fewer, you start talking about digitizing your, digital transformation, they glaze over, they don't care, they don't have time. They want to do what they need to do, but they don't have the capacity. I recently spoke at a conference and somebody kind of challenged and said, where are all the small businesses? I said, seriously? How many could fly to San Diego for a day when they've got 55 people working in the factory and everything needs to run? So we need to pay attention to what we're asking of people. And I think that's part of the metric. When we say what is missing, what's missing is the productivity in manufacturing. The manufacturing productivity is there. We need to start to talk about it. I think it's the #1 metric we need to report out to get people to buy into digitizing their supply chain, buy into digitizing their own factory. We need to talk about what it is that does to you other than make you really cool. So we really need, people lead with money. We need to lead with the money. So all the technology trends shaping the future of manufacturing play into that. And we're doing things so differently now from how we were a short time ago. I just heard Kim was referring with Steelcase. I've been to Steelcase's factory. Steelcase designs for circularity. They design for sustainability. I don't know, I'm calling out Kim. Their desk, I just didn't know this. I live in Michigan, never been to the factory until recently. The pieces in their wooden desk are all little wood dowels. So there's no metal. So if you had to dismantle a Steelcase desk, it's pretty much made of wood. It's just an interesting thing, but they've been designing for sustainability for quite some time. And I think now we're looking at, we need to design for sustainability. We need to apply technology. All technologies that we apply need to be designed for cyber. If you're not designing cyber into technology, don't bring it into my factory, because now I've got a cyber exposure I didn't have before I had you in here. So we have to counteract the risk with the benefits. We get an increased efficiency and productivity. That's great. We have enhanced quality of product, which we're definitely seeing. We're seeing cost reduction for the consumer sometimes. Sometimes the technology in place takes too much money and you don't get all of it. Ideally, we see new revenue streams. And they're interesting new revenue streams, things like an apparel manufacturer being able to use traceability and trace the sweater they make with a thread that stays with it, so that when it's resold at a resale shop, the apparel manufacturer gets a couple pennies back. So long term, we have to incentivize people to make less, and that's a really hard thing to do when we're trying to make money. So we're working on that piece of it. The challenges that come with those, some I've already mentioned. Sometimes it's a high capital investment, cybersecurity risk, the integration complexity, which everybody talked about here. And again, I think Kim brought up a lot of integration complexity in Steelcase. It sounds so much easier on a demo than it does when you bring it into the factory and have humans running it, and it overlays that other piece of equipment you had there you forgot to tell them about at the demo. So we need to pay attention to all of that. And finally, we need to look at all of what can be governed. Where can our policy people come in and step in? I think as much investment in research and development as possible. And we are running behind of where we've historically been as a nation. We're nowhere near where we were with R&D. The R&D is an essential thing for us to stay ahead. I think we could have some sustainability for things, or some incentives for sustainability, for green manufacturing. I met with someone from a major computer company yesterday, and he was telling me how their computer, which is fully sustainable, all recycled, reused products, fully sustainable, has an entire path and a circularity to it, costs 3 cents more than their competitor's computer. And 3 of the major universities that are using his coursework to talk about sustainability bought the competitor's computer because of the 3 cents. So I think that's worth, if I'm going to go to the Department of Commerce with a request, that would be one of them, is, can you offset the 3 cents? And we need to manage this so that we're actually incentivizing people to do the thing we want them to do. Supply chain resilience. Everything that's happening in government, I think government right now is very concerned about supply chain because collaboration has become very difficult. Ironically, during COVID, we collaborated better as a nation. Government was hearing more from industry. Industry heard more from government. We worked together in this really fabulous way. And I really, really hope we don't need a crisis to collaborate. Because right now, if we do need a crisis, we have one. We have an opportunity, right? We have this incredible opportunity to start to rebuild manufacturing on our shores, to build it smart, to do it right, to make it cleaner, to make it faster. And we need to work with our government to get it done. But it's disappointing for me to find that not only is government or industry not hearing from government, but government's not hearing from industry. And I had a conversation with someone recently who said, we don't get people, the same people who asked us for help during COVID are now saying, I can't share my supply chain with you, sorry. So that's a frustration. So I think we're going to need to trust each other. We need third-party organizations that you can trust, who can bring people together and you can say in a closed setting, this is a concern, how do we address it? So I think that's something we have to do with our government. And finally, I was talking a little bit about the CHIPS Act because Sri developed the CHIPS Act. He's the writer of the CHIPS Act predominantly. And I asked him, it's such a great solution to a single problem. How do we build a systemic solution for an industry agnostic problem? We're going to have another problem. We had a chip shortage and it became a crisis. We will have another problem. I would like to not wait for the problem and then go out and have our government craft another CHIPS Act. What is our systemic solution so that at the turn of you can spin on a dime and turn around and say, oh, we can solve that problem. We have a policy ready to go. We have an industry ready to go. We have academia ready to go. So I think that's one of the things people in this room, because you've got all the creative technology ideas, work with the manufacturing companies. Let's find a way to bring these pieces together, because that's a gap that I worry about. The government worries about it. They don't want to do one-off solutions. I think there are a number of industries we have minor crises in now, but rather than solve them industry by industry, I think we need to look at them holistically. The word again, the collaborative. So collaborative initiatives, I think we really need, you've all heard of, we really need true cross-sector partnerships for mutual growth. And when I talk about collaboration or any kind of public-private partnership, it has to be real. It has to be action. You can't have a meeting and produce a white paper. You can't even have a meeting and produce a playbook. I showed a playbook yesterday. It's a step, but if the playbook isn't something that everybody in this room can pick up and say, oh, the 5 things I need to do next, I'm going to check those off and go do them. If an SME can't interpret what a Fortune 500 company is doing, then we're not delivering the right value to them, because the Fortune 500 companies, sorry to those of you who are that, we figure it out on your own. With or without government help, they'll figure it out. But long term, in order for them to have a strong supply chain, they need to buy into a support. So some of the cross-industry partisan or partnerships I see would include bringing your supply chain alongside you. I think that there's a way for large industry with government's incentives to support a new way of looking at things and bring the supply chain along so they're not left waiting for a purchase order that may never happen. At the same time, as we're doing all of this, we're working through our supply chain issues, we also have a shortage of prepared workforce. And I know that what's going on in this room today and what went on yesterday with Tulip, that prepares the workforce. We need to get younger and younger and younger at looking at it, but we always have this conversation about Europe too. Like, Europe is so much ahead of us on celebrating people in manufacturing. I don't think Europe ever frowned upon it to the degree that we do. So we need to own that as a nation, we've gotten very 4-year degree focused. We really like to see our kids, when I go around a room, invariably a room of executives, they all talk about this. We need more people to go to trade schools. We need them to just get a robotics certificate and get out there and work. And then I always ask them, because I do this. And so, how many of you have your kids in a 4-year college? How many of your kids went to trade school? Usually none. So we need to find a way to look at trade school, look at manufacturing floor, look at making things as really exciting. I talked to someone earlier today who told me she'd read, and I want to say, this is just a conversation earlier, that 55% of people under a certain age want to become influencers. Okay, interesting. So at first glance you say, well, they want to become influencers because that's something they see all the time. They also see clothes every day. They see cars every day. We need to start talking about that stuff you buy. You could be one of the people that makes it. You could design it. You could make it. You could figure out how to roll it out. You could develop it. You could find a way to recapture it so it's got circularity components. So we're not quite hitting the mark. And I've gone years of people talking about we need to make manufacturing sexy again. I grew up in Pittsburgh. Let me tell you, manufacturing was never sexy. It just wasn't. It's just hard work, but it was always gratifying. It was very noble. And I think we need to look at the gratification and the nobility of the fact that when you make stuff, it helps your country, it helps your neighborhood, it helps your community. So I want to kind of get back to looking at that. Along with that, we're talking about the, again, I periodically have to look at what some of Sri's thoughts were. He was talking a little bit with me about productivity versus the jobs debate. We get very deeply mired in the debate about jobs and losing jobs, as opposed to the debate about increasing productivity and elevating the opportunities for people. So we have a moment in time, and I use that phrase all the time, but I really believe we have a moment in time, and we're going to run out. You know, we have federal funding, we've got federal policies, we've got these things in place. We need to get together and actually say, this is it. In 2023, 2024, we are going to nail it. We are going to find a way to take a grant from the federal government, and instead of it going to one company, have it go to that company with a stipulation that you have to bring 10 of your downstream supply chains along for your fee. You get this money, but I want to meet all 10 companies who are coming along with you so that your supply chain has the resilience that we need. Because if we don't, and if all the future influencers of the world are out there, and they won't have anything to influence with, we're not going to have products, and we are so close to bringing things back to the U.S. And I'm not nationalist about that kind of thing, but I think we need to build a lot more here, and we have the capabilities. We need to use technology to do it. We need to leverage our government, and that leveraging the government and leveraging your policymakers is absolutely, it's probably the most two-way street I've ever walked. I have policymakers who reach out to me and say, hey, Cynthia, can you give me an idea? I was trying to think about what to do with, they reach out to me because I reach out to them. But if you maintain it, I swear to you, if you send your policymaker a note twice a year, you will hear back from them. And then when you have a question about a policy that you think could be enacted, you will get answers. You will be surprised at how easy that part is, but we have to work together, and I think we need to glue ourselves together. I look at the organization I run, it's just like a big glob of glue, because we do bring policymakers with academics, with our business leaders. You all don't need that, except you need somebody to glue it together and tell the story and make sure that the policy that you all talked about that day gets executed, and somebody needs to hold people accountable. I believe that we are at the cusp of what could be the greatest manufacturing uptick, and it needs to be more than that. It's got to be something better. It's got to be a surge, the greatest surge in our lifetime. We have a chance to really change how things are done, but we really cannot. You can't walk away from this conference with all you learned and think about how cool it was and write to the people you met. There's got to be a very strong action item. I'm making an action list out of today. I'm making an action list out of yesterday, because we need to follow up with Sri from the Department of Commerce, who couldn't be here, and say, this is what people wanted. So I think it's critical that we act now, we act together, and we ask each other for help, and we ask each other for support. And long term, I think our policies are positioned to help us as much as they have been in a long time, and I think this is a moment. So please, with that, capture your moments in time.